Bart encroached upon the gate, raising the English length and a quarter to point it directly at the silver falconer knight. The implement held out in dire grim effusive threat to the Iverian. The guards were surprised. Unblooded, they did not bring their guns to bear. The falconer did have experience in this great declaration, this black game. The man of dust and mud and blood was calm and appreciating the pirate who approached. The knight began the confrontation with his boucanier by grabbing the hilt of the sword at his belt. Removing the grand metal, it sounded as a pharaoh bore in a moment of exertion. A sound of harsh shra emanated from the belt. The leather clattered to the ground. Now the clawing, biting dragons stared at the bright sun, the blue of the sky burning and simmering, enclosing the flesh of these men in the dripping Habana air. The remnants of the day melted into white heat. The church steps, the bricks in the plaza, the center jutting plinth, the passerby and the clouded observer, all faded to grey mush. Bartholomew now focused only upon the equine armor made in the image of silver raptor, all of its protuberance crafted to embrace such a vision, from rondel and helmet, from cuirass double and forced, all fashioned to blades with serrated form, feathers deadly and sharp. A faint light grew upwards from the knight's bever collar, becoming bright with no color, burning and scalding, shadow lines, dark vines, pulsing veins growing behind the man. There a crown of rays ensconced the knight, a great savior of the blade, the light growing precipitously, taking the form of wings, leathery black growths, scaling over the balcony of the second floors of this municipal building. The knight's armor shined, green flames dancing off of the hardened carapace escapelion, reflecting the brilliance of these burning, throbbing, flickering growths from the knight's back, now so bright that the equine skin appeared black, and the locks of his hair burned away, the remaining skull bare to white calcium over the monstrous plate. There the head showed a horrid grin. These sockets were once the eyes, now colored night, black in hue, deeper than the infinite midnight of Caribbean sky. And the creature in the knight's place turned to stare at the pirate. In the very pinprick middle of these sockets, a shining gota of light, a starfire surrounded by black nothingness. The equite was tall and heavy in stature, and he encroached upon Bart the Wistful. And from here the knight was never to gain human form again, replacing helmet upon his head to cover any vestige of his bone and sinew form. Bart the Blade Swinger, in all of his life the folly of attraction, the magnetic pull of such rashness, such mistakes as he embarked upon, not many measured up to an attack upon an armored and full-caloried knight. Bart worried the blade's handle, the length that extended a half farther than his own forlorn scimitar. He felt intimately the leather grip stretched over a square metal handle that Bart now felt foreign and strange. Bart kept the implement outstretched, pointing toward the rapacious equite hospitaller of Europa. The sun-hued knight struck, swiping forward but meeting naught but air. Bart had stepped forward from the flight of steel as if there was a cold breeze drafting down just as he brought the bright point of the length and a quarter blade, that of Shayak Lakashama, forward to touch the center of the falconer's breastplate. There was ever so slight a ring as the knight of Europe breathed, and the armor rose and fell a thousandth of a meter in his exertions. The Sun Knight struck with golden sword again, spiraling the pirate's blade away. Bart moved as he was forced to spin and avoid all contact, and he replaced the gray clouded blade upon the knight's tall shoulder, producing a ting. In a moment the musical note dissipated into nothing, and for a beat of the score there was stillness. The bladed helmet shifted angrily while watching Bart, but the Falcon Knight paused and hesitated to take the measure of this boucanier, sword-placer, sword-slinger, who tormented him so. Then, in furious moment of broken stillness, the knight swung at Bart's head, and the corsair met the blade, directing and displacing it away. Bart at the same moment stepped back 2 and then 3 steps. The swords contacted in loud defense and fell silent once more. The pirouette had placed Bart again outside of the reach of the equite. Bart placed the point of his sword on its boot. He knew not if it had punctured the leather, as he had touched above his missing toes. Bart smiled. Whether it was an ugly smile, he cared not. The raptor knight turned his head to the guards next to him, and he growled a precaution in Spanish. They had lowered their bayoneted muskets, and pointed so that the piercing black eyes of the gun stared at the pirate. Bart cared not a whit if the instruction was to shoot him, to refrain, or whatsoever it could be. Bart cared only for his quarry before him, his entire body incandescent in adrenaline. The knight returned his glare to the corsair standing before him, to the equite who appeared aflame. In glancing moments the attack began in earnest. The falcon knight swung two-handed, hoping to cut the water dweller in half should the blade prick him. Bart jumped away from the swing of the golden glinting blur as he saw that any deflection that Bart could hope to bring to bear with clouded English sword of a length and a quarter would be futile. Over again a black-hand slash. Bart escaped. A downward stroke, the blade flashed into the dust. The feather-needle knife helmet jerked as the armored man struggled to follow the dancing steps of the pirate before him. The knight screamed out at the pirate, some guttural insult about being struck down by God's fury. The knight was lost in anger to not know who was this gnat biting at his velvet equine flesh. Bart felt himself in church pew to hear such pig Latin. Bart responded that even the god had failed to find refuge under this abominable sun of the sweltering hell isle. Though the Boucanier sword-swinger doubted that the bright man before him understood the pigeon drawl he had spoken, he held his sword aloft in the ancient order of armored falconer calculated what action he would take next. Whether for good or for ill of empire, the knight was sworn to strike down the pirate who had deigned to challenge him. The Hospitaller stepped forward, and Bart answered with the parallel mountain stance. Bart's feet moved quick enough, yet he could only favor his foot with 5 toes intact. There was no other way to it. The rump of his sliced digits burned in phantom existence whereupon they were missed. Upon the only force that may keep a swordsman alive, upon his raw instinct, the burnt orange knight struck out at Bart's whole foot, his left. Bart had to defend and wait his right. This required more movement to dance away, and the step pivot was slow. The knight with knives flowing off of his head in depiction of a raptor in soaring flight swung up. Bart was late on the wreck horse, and there was no time for a reverse. The European stock could touch the corsair, and he did rasp upwards upon the pirate's chest, and he cut into the flesh. Bartholomew's skin over his heart now parted and became air, opening as the leaves of a book, the two sides of skin separating away to present some forbidden, forlorn space, now viewed, now exposed, now corrupted, now scabbed and encrusted. This veinous, tendoned, and bone-filled space, where moments before was whole, never to have such light upon it, God's vision never to pierce such veil. Even upon the grave the interior remained unpierced, as once our journey is done, there be dirt to cover us, our bodies invalidated and consumed by fungus, mycordial, and bacterial sponge. Now the blade of this equite granted the impossible to the flesh over Bart. The pirate fell away from further strike. He struck the ground in heavy thud, and thereupon swooping death became known. Bart saw such a vision and was frightened. Blood streamed down Bart's front, and he dared to believe his pectoral muscle and nipple had been shorn away, and he feared that as many ribs as eaten in dinner of Buchan were broken in this wipe. Quick as a cat escaping out of barn, his senses returned to allow him to roll away in that moment. The dust that Bart touched on the ground became wet. Bloody handprints stained the cobblestones, flattened and smoothed away by grinding metal carriage wheel and sharpened shipped horseshoe. The knight looming growled unintelligible drivel, the curse across of Italian and Latin, condemning the pirate as Bartholomew stood, straightening up in rasping fear. Bart could only step backwards. Farther and farther he paced to stay away from the glinting, growling knight. Bartholomew the Valiant tripped backwards over a horseless hitch and chain left in the middle of the plaza, and the pirate was left sitting on his rump. The knight walking forward, the fang of empire held in his clawed, armored greaves. In a moment, Bart felt the breeze shift, if only slightly. The black suit driver of the 2x2 had come down from the top of his heights, a large beaver fur top hat upon his head. He had walked the English length and a quarter sword that had been left with the initial drops of blood, picked it up and measured whether it was intact. It appeared at first that the man was cleansing the area, or grabbed the implement to withhold it from the corsair, and none of the observers paid any heed. Yet as the man retreated back to the periphery, he stripped off black overcoat, leaving a white undershirt, and it walked wide, ranging circumference out of Bart's eyesight. The summer knight stopped his advance, appearing to glance upwards at the new item of focus beyond Bartholomew. A moment stolen, so that the buccaneer could glance over his shoulder, a voice sounded to Bart, familiar if less than desired, at his present moment of humiliation. Bart saw that the tall black hat had been thrown to the ground, the matted locks of hair fallen wildly onto the man's shoulders, giving the appearance of a great blooded, beclawed, bemaned beast. El Buccaneer, grant me return of my sword, for I have use of it. B. Jack. Ha! The fate of the blade in particular is out of my control, and already given to the flecked stones. If I could simply gain my feet again. El. Now, Bart, escape this place. The Sun Knight had found the scene of the two buccaneers intruding upon his plaza, indesirous, imperfect, indecent, and wished it corrected so that the equite began to stamp forward again to reach the pirates. Nakashima brought the clouded blade measuring a length and a quarter to his front. Bart realized that his final peril, that the clash was to be planned above his head. And there the Iberian falcon and equite swung such implement down upon the face of Bartholomew, a momentum that Nakashima could only just pluck from its arc in the very moment before contact. Bart tried as he could to squirm away, though he was having trouble escaping as his ankle and boot had been tangled in the hitching chain. Chayak, the pirate bladesman, became a fury whensoever the length and a quarter blade was placed in his hand. Now in this plaza he was in his element. Nakashima was taller than Bart, heavier, and he needed naught but his forearm to force the equite's blade away. Swipe and stroke and pierce and parry, this lieutenant, erstwhile of the pirate craft Poinsettia, drummed out of employ by this very royalty, now scuffling away under foot of this leviathan devourers and gargantuan tumultuators, forsooth of the blade. The man Chayak now defended his erstwhile rival Politique with grace forward, 1 length and 1 quarter. The two combatants, still upon their feet, swung around in the circle of the fight, dust now rising from the boiling ground. Chayak Nakashima was in command. He smashed away the defending stroke and swept up for a hammer blow, then swiped the blade down in a two-handed motion. In a moment's passage this clash, with scurvy buccaneer, had become a danger to the Falcon Knight. This great denizen of the Empire defended in resounding clang, as the blade struck upon his chest-piece. The fight had tired the equite, and even now it was late, and the Falcon was stung, his strategy in rout. Nakashima was able to place the blade where he desired in this bout. A swift right swing, the knight was retreat left. A wide overhand left, and the knight had to grapple to his right. A step farther back, a round with extended arm, seeking to flick the final inch of the sword into the eyelid of the equite of light. The knight must bring all of his leviathan might to bear upon the block to save himself. The knight teetered upon his heels. Nakashima fought in a manner not nearly as brash as the pirate, but certainly as strong, and so he kept his distance. He kept his sword out, to the ready, coiling, winding, striking, piercing forward, the muscles in his frame striking out at the blade of the sun. The guarding musket holders remained in the rear, their breath held. There, the moment that they decided it had been enough, they leveled their implements and aimed. Their Chayak Nakashima, pirate erstwhile of the Poinsettia, the first timber of the pirate fleet. He saw from the corner of his vision this movement, and he made his final piercing strike at the hospitalier-crowned knight, if only to converge his form with the steel-plated mountain and lock sword arm and crossplate, arresting the knight's movement momentarily. The fire-sticks erupted, white smoke cascading around the two men. A woman close to the cathedral door, another agent of buccaneer such as Chayak, herself dressed in white blouse flowing down to stone, removed a pistol and fired upon the guards, erupting thundershot. Chayak Nakashima broke contact with the metal knight, pushed away and ducked. He retreated within the kayak. Mishigosh! The falconer equite also took the knee, meaning to stay below the fired iron pellets now gouging, searing channels through the air of the plaza. Chayak, the pirate scourge, in white dress shirt, had grabbed his black cloak and ran towards Bart. The Habsburg guards duly knelt, pointing their own implements at the plumes of smoke emanating from marble wall cornering of the cathedral. They shot and were themselves subsumed in smoke. Farther behind the guards with muskets, there was an audience of black-cloaked officials who ducked and crouched by the arches of the municipal building. ready to run at the earliest opportunity. Their second volley from the cathedral, a scattered return by the guards. A skip of the pistol ball rebounded off of the stone by Bart's foot. Even booted, the danger to his flesh was felt in his veins. Shayak skidded to a stop at the pirate's captain's feet. He removed the pistol from leather holster, soon within his cloak, aimed and fired the single shot, throwing the spent thing to the ground, grabbing for Bartholomew with a scruff and pulling him away from the central plaza. Then Bart knew the pirates were in the corner road, opposite the cathedral's looming facade, but the two escapees only could run away from this plaza to escape the musket ball of the Empire and the black blood gallows that stood resolute as of yet. Shayak Lakashama, the pirate blade, carrying his cloak, yelled out at Bart, beseeching him to run, a warning that Bart did not need to hear is seconded, as he careened to the street wall and sprinted as he could to wherever he was pointing. Lakashama still was running to his side, grabbing at the pockets of his jacket, finally removing a key. Lakashama grabbed onto Bart's forearm and growled to continue running, but the blade of the poinsettia then found a key placed in his hand, and he wondered from where it had appeared. An old rusted flanged and flag thing. The old pirate turned then, planting himself in the middle of the narrow street, producing yet a second pistol to point at the opposite end. In a thundering shot, and a puff of white smoke drifting into the expanse of the burning day, the pellet flew through the air, and the old pirate, Shayak Lakashama, he had nothing more to answer to these dark forms protecting Habsburg armor. Bart had fallen behind the collection of barrels, daring to look back. Shayak was already on the ground, a blossom of red growing in the white pocket covering his chest, petals horrible, ruffled, and wrinkled. Bart put his head back under the barrels, and he crawled away from the alley. Bartholomew the Blade ran through the blocks and blocks of Habana. Finally, there at the edge of the city, guards peered at him from their station at the column, surprised by a shirtless, bloodied man, but they did not stop him leaving. Better to be rid of strange men than to accept them in.